and welcome back to the Unseen Podcast, a podcast dedicated to missing people, unresolved cases, and UK true crime. Today we're going to be looking at a historical crime and mystery from 1917. Vera May Glasspool was just 15 years old when she was attacked and killed near Winchester in Hampshire. Her death occurred during the First World War, and unfortunately this meant that her murder may not have necessarily received the attention that it ordinarily would have. Over 100 years later, it still remains unsolved. This episode contains descriptions that some listeners may find distressing, so listener discretion is advised. The village of Owslebury is located in the county of Hampshire, around 5 miles from the city of Winchester. The village is very small and has only a limited number of amenities today. As it's located on top of a hill, it's relatively isolated from the other villages around it, with running water and electricity only arriving in the village after the Second World War. The village, however, has always had a community feel, and up until the present day, those that live there appreciate the links that they have with their neighbours and the area. In the early 20th century, many of the residents worked on the land as farmers, or were employed by the two estates located close to the village, Marwell Hall and Longwood House. The Glasspool family were no exception to this. Eli and Agnes Glasspool lived at Rose Cottage in the area of Baybridge in Owslebury with their 8 children, 4 sons and 4 daughters. Vera May was the second youngest in the family and was born in 1902. She grew up in the village and the family were known to many of the local residents. She was described as pretty and friendly by those that knew her at the time, and she was later described in the Western Gazette newspaper as a favourite in the district, suggesting that she was also a popular person. Her father Eli worked at Longwood House, an estate with extensive grounds and gardens, as a woodsman. When Vera grew to be a teenager, it was here that she would also get herself a job as a scullery maid in September 1916. This was a good opportunity for Vera and meant that she was much more independent and able to help her family out with her wages. In 1917, Vera was 15 years old and working and living at Longwood House. She came home to visit her parents during her days off, which were Sunday and Tuesday, and would give her wages to them for the household. Her father Eli had unfortunately lost his job at Longwood House, as they reduced the number of estate hands that were working on the property. This meant that Vera's wages were all the more important to keep them afloat. Vera's teenage years also coincided with the First World War, and in 1917 the country was in the midst of chaos, with families everywhere being affected by tragedy. 2 of Vera's brothers had been deployed in both the Army and Navy, and there wasn't a single person who hadn't been affected in some way due to the war, even in the small village of Owslebury. For some in the village, such as Vera, her parents' and her sister's life did have to go on, and they continued to carry on as they normally could with their everyday lives. This is what Vera was doing during July 1917, as she carried on her duties as a maid as usual. On Wednesday the 11th of July, Vera's father Eli noticed that she had not made her usual trip to see them the day before on the Tuesday. This was her day off, and she would usually come to see them without fail. This worried her father, as it was certainly out of character, and made him concerned that there was something wrong. That afternoon he decided to go out and look for her along the 2-mile journey that she would have taken to get to their home from Longwood House. It's reported in the Illustrated Police News on the 19th of July that the journey that Vera usually took was not a secluded or lonely one. The article states that Vera continued her way through the unfenced high road out through the woodland, a picturesque but not lonely way. Vera's older sister Edith, who was 28 at the time, decided to help her father look for Vera, and the pair set out tracing her route backwards from their home. They got around halfway, a mile from their house, when they came across a scene that they had hoped they would never see. As they approached an area called Featherbed Copse, they noticed a body lying about 35 yards away from the high road. It was Vera, and it was clear that she had been attacked. She had visible wounds to her throat and neck, and her mackintosh coat was over her head. It was also evident that her clothing had been disarranged. This awful scene must have been horrendous for her father and sister, and they immediately contacted the police. There was no doubt that this was a murder. The scene was not consistent with someone that had died from natural causes, and the manner in which her body had been left suggested that she may have been attacked while walking and left in that position. Superintendent Smith from Hampshire Constabulary attended the scene and took over the investigation. The brutal murder of a young girl in the village was unheard of, and it quickly spread around Owslebury. Vera was a child at just 15 years old and had her whole life ahead of her. The community was appalled that the simple act of walking to her parents' house had resulted in her death. Why would someone have wanted to do such a thing to Vera, and where were they now? Superintendent Smith set about trying to figure out when the attack had happened, and the time in which Vera set out to reach Rose Cottage and her parents. It's reported in the same Illustrated Police News article that it was established that Vera had left Longwood House at around 3 p.m. on the previous Tuesday afternoon, and set out on her usual route. Her body was found at around 3 p.m. on the Wednesday afternoon, which appeared to match the time of death estimated by the medical professionals. They believed that she had been dead around 24 hours by the time that she was found on the Wednesday afternoon. This would mean that she was killed very quickly after setting out on her journey. This made her death all the more tragic, as she appeared to have been murdered on a route that she did regularly and without any problems. The police analysed the area in which she'd been found for any clues as to what had happened to her. It's reported that the piece of grass that she was found on showed no signs of any sort of struggle, and only that part of the area was trodden. This, it was said, indicated that she must have been in that area voluntarily. None of the surrounding bushes or leaves appeared trampled, as though a violent incident had broken out. It was suggested in the Illustrated Police News article that either Vera had walked to the area quietly and gently, or she had been carried there without struggling by two people. This was interesting, as Vera's wounds and clothing indicated that something violent had indeed occurred, but there were no signs of anything out of the ordinary at the scene. Just days after the discovery of Vera's body, an inquest was conducted. A Dr. Richards of Winchester conducted the examination of Vera and testified at the inquest about what he discovered about her injuries. In an article in the People newspaper on the 22nd of July, it was reported that Dr. Richards stated her cause of death was partly due to strangulation, and partly due to the stab wound that had been inflicted. He explained that the sleeve of Vera's Macintosh coat, on closer inspection, was found to be wound around her neck tightly. It was only tied once in a knot, however it reportedly took quite a lot of force to undo, and when it was undone, it had made a clear impression on Vera's neck. Dr. Richards also found a stab wound to her neck that was around an inch long. He believed that this wound had been inflicted while Vera was partly conscious or near death. He told the inquest that Vera had not been maltreated in any other way, suggesting that there was no evidence of a sexual assault, despite the disarranged clothing. He explained that the injuries were not consistent with Vera causing them to herself or from an accident. The official cause of death was listed as strangulation with hemorrhage. From this initial inquest, it was evident that Vera's death was indeed the result of foul play. However, it was adjourned so that police could continue with their inquiries. Newspapers at the time reported that police were having a tough time tracking down any leads, and the Sheffield Daily Telegraph even reported the county police were without any clue. This was not a comfort to Vera's family, who were still coming to terms with her death, and particularly the manner in which it had occurred. Vera was very much missed in her family and in the local community, and the fear that whoever had committed this may return to do it again was not far from people's minds. The Western Gazette reported at the time, "It's needless to add that the tragedy has cast quite a gloom over the district." The mourning of the village was particularly evident at Vera's funeral, which took place at St Andrew's Church in Owslebury. It's reported in the Hampshire Chronicle that almost 200 people attended the funeral, and articles from the time report that there were many floral tributes sent to the family. Vera's two brothers, who had been away at war, attended the funeral, and many of the villagers went to express their sadness and condolences. Vera's death certainly added to the upset felt in a community that was already feeling the effects of the war on their families. The police were aware of the effect that this murder had had on Owslebury, and did continue trying to track down as many leads as they could. It was proving difficult, however, as the murder had occurred on a route that did not seem to have many pedestrians on it that day, and during that time, cars and passing traffic could not be relied upon for eyewitness sightings. The police were able to track down one person, however, who provided some new and possibly useful information. This was presented at the second inquest conducted on Vera's murder. Florence Edith Wells also worked as a servant at Longwood House along with Vera and was quite close to her. Florence told police that on Sunday the 8th of July, just 2 days before her death, she and Vera had met some soldiers. She explained that one of them was from the Royal Garrison Artillery and another from the Army Service Corps. She explained that they had agreed to meet with them again on the Tuesday. However, when the day came, Vera told her she had made her own arrangements with two of the soldiers. Florence told the inquest that Vera left by herself that day, and she did not know of what her plans had been. This was particularly interesting to police due to the proximity of Hazeley Down Army Camp at just 1.5 miles away. The camp had been built in 1915 as a military transit camp and could accommodate up to 6,510 troops. If Vera had been meeting two soldiers from the camp, who were they and could they have anything to do with her murder? Edith, Vera's sister, who had discovered her body with her father, also gave testimony at the inquest. She was asked whether Vera was in the habit of meeting up with soldiers, and Edith replied no, indicating that this sort of behaviour was unusual for her sister. Another witness from Longwood House also testified at the inquest. Mrs. Gay, the lodgekeeper and wife of the gardener, testified that she saw Vera on the day that she was killed. She said that she saw her as she left the estate that day and that she was alone and nobody else was in sight when she went around the corner out of the estate. This confirmed that nobody from the house was seen leaving with her and that whatever had happened to her occurred when she had left the estate. It also came to light that something may have indeed been stolen from Vera during the attack. A silver, keyless, wristless watch with flowers and stars on the face was missing from Vera's body. She wore this watch regularly, and it was believed that she would have had it on when she went out that day. This was also a potential lead for police, as it was hoped that this watch could be tracked down and as a result lead them to the perpetrator. Vera's father Eli, however, confirmed that he did not believe that Vera would have had any money with her when she travelled to their house. Therefore, that would not have been a possible motive to rob her. He explained that they received her wages and Vera had no other financial means. It was also reported in the Illustrated Police News article that a locket and chain that had been around Vera's neck was discovered broken and discarded just a foot away. This is the only place that I have found this information, however, so I don't know how credible this is. At the end of the second inquest, the jury delivered their ruling. They stated that Vera's death was the result of willful murder against some person or persons unknown. This verdict only confirmed what many people in the community already knew. Vera had been murdered on the short journey to her home. The police began looking into the soldiers that Florence Wells had described and spoke to those stationed at the Hazeley Down camp. However, without a real description or names, this also proved difficult. The camp was a transit camp, and therefore there were soldiers coming and going regularly in the area. There was also the issue that it was not known if any of these soldiers were in any way involved in Vera's death. The police decided to offer a £50 reward for anyone who came forward with information about the murder, or those that may have been responsible. This was quite a sizable reward at the time, amounting to around £3,500 in today's money. This would have been a huge amount of money to offer as a reward, but unfortunately it did not seem to bring in the tips that the police were hoping for. There is one reference to a possible sighting in the area at the time, however it is not widely reported in all sources. It was reported in the People newspaper on the 15th of July that a soldier had actually been seen close to the spot where Vera's body was later found. This was reportedly just before her body was discovered. Whether this is a credible sighting is unknown, however it does seem to match the information that the police received about possible suspects for the crime. Weeks and months passed by in the investigation and nothing further was reported about Vera's murder. Police continued to try and track down leads, however there was a distinct lack of information to go on, and unfortunately Vera's case began to go cold. In December 1917, her name was once again mentioned in the headlines when new information came to light. Someone had confessed to Vera's murder. It's reported in the Liverpool Daily Post on the 4th of December that year that a soldier named Private William Fenn from the Royal Army Medical Corps stopped a police constable in Blackpool and confessed to the crime. He reportedly approached Police Constable Burrows and told him, quote, "Look here, Constable, I give myself up to you for the murder of a young girl at Winchester about 5 months ago." Police Constable Burrows took him to the police station and cautioned him. He then reportedly made a voluntary statement saying, "About 6 months ago I murdered a girl named Gladys Glasspool, aged 15 years, by cutting her throat in a copse near Winchester. The parents live in a village nearby. She was dressed in fawn clothing. I had met her 4 or 5 times. I murdered her in the morning. I want to get it over quick. I cannot sleep for thinking about it. I was then at Bournemouth. I will say no more. The rest is only known by God and myself." This statement is curious, mainly due to the things that are inaccurate. While Fenn got some details correct, such as the area and the manner in which Vera was killed, he got some very important things wrong, the main one being her name. The fact that he called her Gladys was strange, and he also stated that he had killed Vera in the morning, which was known to be incorrect. Fenn was held on remand until the information was passed on to Hampshire police. Notices of the reward had been posted up in police stations across the country, and therefore it wasn't strange that someone had been picked up so far from Hampshire in Blackpool. However, the content of the confession did seem odd. The arrest did give people hope, however, that someone may finally have been caught, and as Fenn was a soldier, it seemed plausible due to the evidence that had already been collated about the murder. Hampshire police did look into William Fenn as a suspect and checked if his story added up. Unfortunately, this uncovered a major flaw in Fenn's confession. After an investigation into his whereabouts during the time of the murder, police discovered that it was actually impossible for him to have committed the crime, as he was actually miles away at a different camp at the time when she was murdered. William Fenn could not have committed the murder, and he was released. It would appear that this was a false confession and in fact had nothing to do with the actual crime. The hope that Vera's family had started to slowly fade away once more. Vera's case went cold from this point, and there is not much published about her case. It's reported in the Hampshire Chronicle that there were no files at the archives relating to her case, including police archives, local archives in Hampshire, or the National Archives. It would appear that her case had just disappeared from all public record, aside from the contemporary news articles. There isn't even a photograph of Vera to be found anywhere, adding to this feeling that she has somehow been forgotten by society, which is so sad for a 15-year-old child who was murdered in such a callous way. In 2017, there was finally some sort of remembrance of Vera's life. A service was held at St Andrew's Church in Owslebury to commemorate 100 years passing since her death. This is a lovely thought, and finally put Vera back into the headlines after such a long time. What do we know about what happened to Vera? It's clear that she was attacked during her journey to her parents' house, and that whoever had committed it had access to a knife to carry out the crime. In a rural area in 1917, however, this would not have been unusual, and does not narrow it down a lot. The knife was never found, and the perpetrator may have taken it with them. There is some confusion about whether there was a struggle or not during the attack. Some reports indicate that there was evidence that Vera had fought back, but others suggest that the scene did not seem disturbed. However, it is likely that she fought back in some way. The area was not known for strangers regularly passing through, and therefore was it someone known to Vera, or could it have been one of the soldiers she had reportedly been meeting? I think the lack of evidence such as witnesses at the time severely hindered the investigation. Investigations during this time relied heavily on witnesses and known facts, as forensic evidence was unavailable, and other methods of investigation had not been fully developed yet. If this crime had happened now, there would probably have been a wealth of information to go on. There is also the huge impact that the First World War would have on resources, and its effect on every area of the UK cannot be understated. As Vera's murder happened during this time, I think it may have been forgotten about due to the understandable weight that the war was having on everyone. Under these circumstances, I think Hampshire police most probably did their best. I think it's so sad that Vera's murder has gone unsolved for so many years, and at this point it may never be solved, although I do always hold out some hope. My aim with this episode is to remember Vera, and remember that she was only a child when she was killed, and that's the most tragic thing about it. Justice may be difficult to find in this case, but we can still remember Vera. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I would like to first of all thank June's Journey for sponsoring this episode, and if you're interested in playing the game, which I'm sure you will love, download it for free from the App Store or Google Play, or by clicking on the link in the show notes. Thank you to all of our patrons for your amazing support of the podcast. If you'd like to have a look at what we offer on there, including bonus episodes, ad-free early access, and stickers and shout-outs, take a look at the link in the show notes. I also have another thank you to all the people who have been reviewing the podcast. Giving us a review wherever you listen is always so helpful. Please do connect with me on social media on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and YouTube, or you can send me case suggestions or just general comments and questions to my email at theunseenpod@gmail.com. I hope you can join me again next week as we delve into another case. And as always, I'm Caprice, and this has been Unseen.